This is the orientation of history optional. Orientation of history optional. So before I start, these questions I could not answer. Obviously, you can get it from management. So history optional, there would be 4 teachers teaching it. First is ancient history, which would be taught by me, and my name is Praveen Dikshit. Second would be medieval history. Rohan sir will teach it. So second part. Third would be modern Indian history. Tariq sir will teach it. And fourth is modern world history from 18th century onwards. Chandrabhan sir will teach it. Entire optional is of 500 marks. Paper 1, 250. Paper 2, 250 marks. Each portion has around 125 marks into 4. And remember one thing, 1 and 2 portion are combined, so marks could be more and less in mutual. This is paper 1, this is paper 2. So these are the 4 parts of the syllabus which we will discuss. ठीक है. Then how this would be taught. So first thing is, the first duration, let me tell you, it will take about 5 months. So we are in June, and hopefully by end of November or early December, this course should end. Although it also depends on the question of the students. If students while course are curious, so it may extend by 1 or 2 or 5, 10 classes in every portion. Second thing, how this will be taught. The first thing is sources. What are the sources which would be taught in this? So class notes. First thing is class notes. It's almost, in GS there is no guarantee how much will be asked, how much will not be asked. But in optional, whatever class notes will be taught, there is almost a guarantee that these questions are asked. Just for example, optional is more conceptual. And that's why there is more chances to be asked about the concept. Any one of you have any history of reading history? Ever read history in college or? ठीक बात है. I hope you can understand that the information based GS is a bit difficult to predict in comparison of concept based optional. So optional is based on concept, that's why its strike rate is much higher. And in GS, whatever will be taught, it is all based on info. A bit difficult to remember. That's why I have seen that students are generally threatened by the GS. They feel GS is difficult, optional will be equally difficult. But if you will read the history subject, you will feel that concepts are easy to remember rather than information, because information is infinite, concepts are fixed and finite. Then, what would be the flow? Anyone heard the term pedagogy or pedagogy, if you know this? What is pedagogy? Way of teaching. Or I generally say it is the flow. So first thing in flow is historiography. Historiography means how the subject goes or what are the views. Anyone would like to tell who is more important in the independence of India? गांधी जी और सुभाष चंद्र बोस? सुना है आपने इनके नाम सुने? नाम गांधी जी और सुभाष चंद्र बोस, हु इज मोर इंपॉर्टेंट? गांधी जी. हाँ जी. Both to obviously, but I am asking for the comparison. Haji, who is more important? So I would not suggest you to answer this question like this. Although everyone is biased, I am also biased, you would also be biased. But there is no need to answer this question like Gandhiji or Bose. The reason is, you have to give the views of the scholars. Or not scholars, but prominent views. Prominent views. Imagine you are in interview and someone asks you, analyze the performance of Modi government in last 12 years. Why to take risk and say ki according to you it is bad or good? That's how the standard views appear. According to some scholars, Gandhiji is more important. According to some scholars, Bose is important. You have to know all the views. In any subject, your view means your view or standard view. Please guess. When someone say what is your view in question, in answer you have to write your view or standard view. Standard view, not your view. Otherwise, no question is wrong, no answer is wrong. They say you ask me what is the solution of Indian economy, and I say solution of Indian economy is burn all the cities and return back to jungle. Will it be right answer? So no. My view here doesn't mean my view. So first thing is you have to know the views, because it is the views which is more important rather than the events which are generally asked in optional. For example, I am sure you must have heard the name of King Ashok. He tells his people, live a moral life. We call it Dhamm of Ashok. I am sure some of you must have heard. Every second year they repeat this question. Please tell me, a king is saying his people become moral because king himself is personally moral, or because a king who won everything and want to peacefully consolidate his empire? Please tell me what is the main reason Ashok is talking morality to his people, asking his people to become moral. Because Ashok is personally moral, or Ashok won everything and he want to peacefully consolidate the empire? Any guess? What you feel according to you is more legitimate view. Peaceful consolidation. Asked last year, what are the imperial aims of Ashok's Dhamm? So you only need to know it is a view. British came to India to civilize it or to loot our wealth. Any guess? Main reason. Our history is based on this. But time and again UPSC trick us by asking this. White man's burden or civilizing mission. If I am a lawyer fighting a case and I know the view of my opponent lawyer, it will make me easy to win the case or difficult? Easy. We have to know every view. Although there is a prevalent view always, in our history, this is the prevalent view. In Ashokan history, this is the prevalent view. This is the prevalent view. There is a prevalent view, but you have to know all the views. Knowing the view is the beginning of the history optional or history as a subject. If you do not know the views, you will read a simpleton form of history, where you cannot analyze anything. It's like a math student who only knows tricks. The moment the concept is thrown open to him, he is unable to answer. So first thing, which generally teachers discuss, and we always make sure to discuss, is the historiography or the views. For example, you must have heard the famous controversy going on for last 1 week. Audrey Trushke says, the seal is of Pashupati or seal is some European god. Haji, what is our view? Indian view, Pashupati. But doesn't mean we should not know the other's view, because then what will you defend? And that's why always remember, your answer, your statement should be the standard views. First thing which we do in history optional is to know these standard views, established views. You must have heard this also. Nehru was better first prime minister or Patel would have been. Once UPSC asked a question, what if there would have been no Gandhi? If there would have been no Gandhiji? What would have been independence of India? अगर गांधी जी ना होते तो इंडिपेंडेंस कैसी होती? What could have been the answer? Please, anyone? Now my view is just give the views of the scholars. Gandhian themselves say independence would have been postponed by 30 years. People like Bhagat Singh and nationalist revolutionaries say without Gandhiji we would have achieved independence earlier. Congress leaders say without Gandhiji India would have been fragmented. Socialists say without Gandhiji our independence would have been more of distributive justice, not dominated by jamidar and businessmen. Just the views, majority of them are views. If you know the view, you look a literate man. So first thing is views. Second is the event or the story. Although this should be first, but yes, views are first, so that you should know how to read the story. So obviously the events of a story are very important. For example, if I ask you a basic question, how Indian Constitution is based on Government of India Act 1935. Anyone heard Government of India Act 1935? How it is dependent? You should know the story of it. If I say 1857 revolt is a starting of a new era or end of the old era? Any guess? 1857 revolt is a start of a new era or end of an old era? नहीं, one prominent view. ऐसे तो both है. End of an old era. How? Kings were fighting, last fight of the king. Army mutinies, Barakpur other, last mutiny. No involvement of middle class and so on. If you know the event, you will be able to do it correctly. For example, UPSC generally used to ask how Alauddin Khilji's market reforms prospered the economy. Last year they asked how Alauddin Khilji's market reforms devastated the economy. You have to know both the views and the events of the story. If you are not aware of the events, there is no chance you are going to understand. This is the basic. Just telling you, this is nothing but GS. Ye hai GS. And that's why entire history optional is to be read in GS also. Ancient, medieval, modern world. There you only need to know the events, which is around 80% of the job. Here events plus historiography plus current debates. For example, Pashupati seal is current event. That increases the chance that UPSC will ask the question on Harappan religion. What is the religion of Indus Valley civilization? Why? Because question is in a current debate. So if you are a literate person, a student who's well aware, after these two, your job is to take interest in the current debates. I don't want to discuss this in detail. Let me tell you the importance of current debate. It is a bit political in nature. If ever I have to make India a Hindu Rashtra in future, किसी को हिंदू राष्ट्र बनाना है, what will they do? They will say, we did not lose our independence in Plassey. We lost our independence in Second Battle of Tarain. I hope you have heard what is happening in Tarain. What happened in Tarain? Muhammad Ghori defeated Prithviraj Chauhan. If ever you want to make a change in present, you have to make change in history. If I have to make reservation 100%, I will say we lost our independence not here, but 1200 BC. What happened in 1200 BC? Arrival of Aryans. They will say Aryans colonized us. India belongs to lower caste people. Whatever changes in present or future is to be taking place, they will take place from the events, debates of history, More you are aware of these debates, the better chances you will be able to understand what type of questions generally scholars like to ask. And that's why you would see, anyone heard in GS also we have a current affairs of history. Which topic is in news, which topic is important, where Prime Minister visited, 500th year. Anyone heard this? There is the current affairs of history also. Every historical event comes in light because of some recent news. And the moment that news comes in light, there are great chances that question could be asked. And that's why every year there is a list compendium, 100-year completed. Jaise year is 2026. Next year, 2027 will be the 100th anniversary of 1927. 100th anniversary of Simon Commission. So Simon Commission, Nehru Report, 100th anniversary. So that comes in importance. And that's why we have to cover the debates of the history also. Then, changes. What are the changes which are done? Changes means changing interpretation. For example, when nationalists were ruling, nationalist means Congress government, independence was more important than partition. But when the right-wing parties are coming, partition is becoming more important than independence. Understanding these things. Let me tell you a difficult thing. I don't think you will be understanding it much. Anyone heard who are the major gods of Rig Veda? Anyone with history background? Indra, Mitra, Vayu, Varun. Main gods of Puran? Shiv, Brahma, Vishnu. Question of UPSC in 2020 or 21. Puran were written to make Vedic gods famous. Ab how to answer this changing question? You go to all the books of Upinder Singh, R.S. Sharma. It is mentioned that these are Vedic gods, these are Puranic gods. But UPSC is asking how Puran were written to make Vedic gods famous. Any guess how to answer this? So the guess of answering is this information is wrong. Most important gods of Yajurveda are Brahma, Vishnu, Shiv, Rudra, Ganpati. That's why these only are major Rig Vedic gods. These gods appear in later Vedic age, not in Puranic age. This generally is not covered in the books because books are according to one ideology. That is the teacher's job to tell you. That's why you would see many students say that history optional lately is less scoring. One of the reasons is history is changing. Books like Satish Chandra and Irfan Habib say Alauddin Khilji's market reforms were good. UPSC asked Alauddin Khilji's market reforms were bad, devastating. It's like in 1942 civil service exam, Karjan was a good man or bad man? Good man. And in 1952 exam, Karjan was a bad man. You have to know these changes. It is a teacher's duty to tell you these changes, that how our history is changing. So this is the next. Then, most important than all of this, sabse zyada important, which is reality of the exam, answer writing. If anyone ever thought, just asking, what are the qualities of a good student? Matlab good answer. Anyone ever thought on this? Let me explain what my view is. Diverse points and keywords in these points. That's why it is my duty and every teacher's duty. After teaching a topic, it should be reduced to table. If you cannot reduce any topic in GS and optional into bullet points, you are not a good student. You are an illiterate student. Please answer this question. For last 8 decades, judiciary has played an important role in the sustenance and prosperity of the Indian democracy. Please tell me what would be the answer of this. फिर से सुन ले question. In last 8 decades, GS का question, judiciary has played an important role in the sustenance and the prosperity of Indian democracy. What are they asking? Anyone in Hindi? Hindi में बता दे. क्या पूछ क्या रहा है? What will you start here? Don't worry about introduction, conclusion. Just a table. Tell me one power of judiciary. जल्दी से एक judiciary की power बता दे. Judicial review. How this judicial review is important for democracy? Accountability of legislature. So no dominance of or misuse of power by legislature. If you cannot do this, you are not a good student. ज्ञान किसी को नहीं चाहिए आपसे. No one is important, aware of, or interested in your paragraph knowledge. You are not there to give a speech like I am giving. That's why whatever we will study, at the end we will summarize it in the keywords. And if we cannot summarize, anyone from GS here, I am sure, जैसे when we read Vedic age, so we write 31 bullet points of Vedic age. What is the main metal of Rig Vedic age? Copper. Later Vedic age? Iron. Mahajanpad age? Iron. Unit of society in or polity in Rig Vedic age? Jan. Later Vedic age? Janpad. Mahajanpad age? Mahajanpad. If we cannot reduce our information in these bullet points, that information is useless. So it is teacher's duty, our duty, after teaching everything, all this chaos, it should be reduced to answer writing. Without answer writing means three things: body, points, two good sentences which we call introduction, two good sentences which we call conclusion. This is your duty while studying. This will come from practice. So everything should be reduced in bullet points, entire chapter. Anyone would like to tell which is more centralized, Mauryan age or Gupta age? Mauryan age. Feudal? Gupta age. Which has dominance of Buddhism? Mauryan age. Dominance of Hinduism? Gupta age. There are 30 points which I give students, difference between Gupta and Mauryan age. After all the chapter, all the interest, all these political discussions, Hindu Rashtra and all this, it should be reduced to the bullet points, which is our duty to give. Answer writing. That is nothing but answer writing. Last thing which generally is my duty, mapping. Any one of you have heard that mapping is a tricky or difficult part of the history optional? You must have heard this. Mapping is of 50 marks, which I generally cover in 10-11 classes of mapping at the end. Generally, let me show you. Problem of a student is not mapping. Problem of a student is less knowledge of history. Students are not poor in mapping. They are poor in history. Please tell me, a recently very successful IPL team. Bangalore. A city famous for its color. Jaipur. A city where a female leader is seeing a crisis for last 1 month. Kolkata. A city of movie production. Mumbai. None of your answer is wrong. An ancient education center. Nalanda. Now one question which you very less chances you will be able to answer. An ancient capital famous for silk production. Tell me, in this case, you do not know the mapping or you do not know the information. Information lack. It's not that you lack history mapping a lot. You lack information about it. Let me tell you, it is capital of Satavahan Empire. Any guess? Good. Pathan, Pratishthan. Good. So because he knew Pratishthan or Pathan, the answer is Pathan. Good. So this is how we tackle the questions. Please tell me an ancient port or early medieval port famous for silk export? ना ना कोरकई यहां पे, मसूलीपट्टनम यहाँ. Pallav used to send their. Anyone heard capital of Pallav? Kanchipuram. Do you know Pallav silk is called Kanjivaram silk? कांचीपुरम से तो है कांजीवरम सिल्क साड़ी, पता नहीं आपको? पता करो यार, प्रतिष्ठान पता है तो. And they used to sell their cotton from 100 kilometer west to east to a port called Mamallapuram or Mahabalipuram. The moment you will be aware of these things, it all will start making sense. Meaning is the geography of history. For example, if I ask you a mountain peak in Nepal, Mount Everest. Let me tell you, none of my dots are exact. Jaipur and Mount Everest are not at same level. But still you answered. The reason is you have the feeling for it. And that's why the more feeling, better feeling you have of the topic, the better your mapping and answer writing would be. And last thing, whatever we will teach entirely is in GS. All the parts of history optional are in GS. 80% of it, that is events or story. ठीक है? I think I have conveyed these are the 4 parts. Ancient I'll teach, medieval Rohan sir will teach, modern Tariq sir will teach, and world history Chandrabhan sir will teach. Class notes are obviously enough. More than enough, almost guarantee. But still, there would be some books which will be prescribed. Not because you have to read these books, because without books, students also feel that they are missing something. Anyone heard a very famous slang of Gen Z? FOMO. FOMO means fear of missing out. बस इसलिए पढ़ना है. Because none of the book will be able to cover all of this in great detail. Every book has some positives, some negatives. And class notes would be more than sufficient. We have a thick class notes which will be provided. And this is how. I don't think. Is there any question? कोई question है? If you have a question, may ask. ठीक है. I'm asking Chandrabhan sir. He's perhaps waiting.
So good evening to all of you. Praveen sir has comprehensively discussed most of the introductory part and also how the classes will go. What is the general expectation of the commission from the subject? I will just add few things to that and then focus a bit more on the section which I teach here in Vajiram and Ravi. First, that what differentiates the history optional subject or history optional from, say, GS, which has also been covered by sir, but I would like to just express my views on that, because it is very important that you must from the beginning understand that you need to have slightly different approach in reading your optional subject, given the fact that there is a lot of overlap in terms of syllabus. Maybe the depth required is different, but the orientation has to be different. And when you understand this difference between GS and optional, then the treatment of the subject will be on the lines, and that then you will not make that mistake. Because it would be wrong to say that if you understand the subject or the content well, you will be equally capable of writing answers both well in GS and optional. No, that is not the case completely. Yes, understanding is there. So when I talk about, and how many of you are from a history background in terms of graduation? Any of you? I think only 2. That means others are trying to take this subject because of the interest that you have cultivated, either while preparing GS or you have a general interest in history, and that is a fair point, because we also recommend that the most important criteria for you to take the subject is not to look at anything else, not to do a qualitative or quantitative analysis that how much by preparing history optional you will benefit in GS. I don't go by that logic much, because to prepare any optional, you must first understand your orientation with respect to optional. Even if that optional has, say, any optional has a huge overlap with GS, but you don't have interest or orientation for that, you will not be able to continue or do justice to that optional. So that is the first criteria. I always tell students that when you choose an optional, it should be by your natural disposition, not based on any calculation that you do or any market trend or analysis. As far as analysis is concerned, let me just give you a point to ponder over for your consideration, that in the last few years, history optional has also been doing very well. Last year, I think, to the best of my knowledge, 6 to 7 students in the final 100, top 100 were from history optional. Agreed. So means if you prepare this optional and any optional well, then there is always a scope for you to reach as high rank as possible. There is no general resistance to this. Next part, having developed an interest in history optional, having cultivated an orientation for history optional, you from the beginning must understand the different approach or the same topic when it has to be written in GS, because there is a lot of overlap, and in optional the approach has to be slightly different. That is why I always suggest that if you look at the nature of the subject, means nature of the subject, when you talk about optional preparation, I'm talking about optional preparation, I'm not talking about GS. And as it has been already said, that the good part about optional preparation is that it is more along the expected lines, unlike GS, where the degree of unpredictability is high. And also why the degree of unpredictability is high in GS is because people tend to read less in GS. They largely focus on few notes or an NCERT, and they expect the questions to reflect from that area. Whereas in optional, in the next 5.5 months, we cover every topic in such a comprehensive manner that not only the PYQs, but the questions which get asked are also along the expected lines. That is the thing. So never judge this subject or its success based on whatever you have experienced in your GS preparation. Now, when we talk about the nature of the subject for optional, I believe that there are 3 pillars of history optional, very, very important. 3 pillars are there, and once you understand these 3 pillars and you start preparing every topic or thinking along these 3 pillars, then life will become easy for you and you will know that, okay, where you have to put more effort. First pillar is what everybody studies and should know, that is called as narrative. History is a subject which is presented in the form of stories. A lot of events have happened, and many of these stories, especially when we talk about Indian history, it has an element of continuity and change. Agreed? So that is why history is that subject on which movies are made, because it is presented in the form of a story and you must know the story. Without knowing the story, you will not be able to move to the second pillar or the third pillar. Always understand this. So first part is narrative. Narrative means you must know. You are not required by the commission to memorize or to have complete command over the events. For example, in world history, with the portion I take, we will be talking about a lot of events that have happened. We will go in details with the prominent events that happened during the 1770s, culminating in the American War of Independence. You must know about it. आपको ups and downs मालूम होना चाहिए. You must know who are the prominent leaders, who are the prominent historical figures, possibly which are the milestone events also. Like in French Revolution, we will discuss, we will start with fall of Bastille, tennis court oath, agreed, constitution. So this is something, why? Because without knowing the story, we will not be able to move to the next parts. But it is a myth, or those who do not understand fully the nature of the examination and the subject, they believe that this thing is something that they must be completely in command with. No, it is not required. There are so many events that have happened, so many developments, but you must know it roughly. You need not remember everything. That is not required, and that is not what you are supposed to. But yes, we start with this. This is the first part, which you do in GS also. The second part is, once you have understood the narrative, then you start developing dimensions to this. History is a root subject, a subject which explains the development along political lines, social changes, economic changes, agreed, changes in the religious domain, cultural changes, psychological changes, and sometimes we study all this in the backdrop of geographical. So once you study any topic, you should start trying to figure out the political dimensions, economic dimensions, social dimensions, if I'm not saying always, cultural dimensions, religious dimensions, psychological dimensions, and obviously has these changes also been affected by geography? So we also study geographical determinism, not always. For example, any topic you ask, any topic, you study so many Gandhian movements, you study say Bardoli Satyagraha. What happened? What is the political dimension of Bardoli Satyagraha? Why it is connected with the larger demand of Swaraj? What political mileage or leverage was Gandhiji trying to do? Why it is said that Bardoli Satyagraha and the anti-Simon protest revived the momentum of Gandhian movement, which had largely subsided after the decline of or suspension of non-cooperation? So ये हो गया political dimension. Then आप पढ़ोगे बारदोली सत्याग्रह में that there is a social dimension also. Gandhiji says that the upper caste Ujjali Paraj must work for the Kali Paraj. That's the social dimension, because he believed that the Varn system, or whatever evils and problems are in the Varn system, it should not be overthrown or it should not be eradicated like people like Periyar and Ambedkar. He believed in reform within the community. That is a social dimension. Then you see economic dimension. So Bardoli Satyagraha was associated with the economic distress of the peasants. To what instance this economic distress was addressed? What were the peasant issues? ये हो गया economic. हो सकता है during that movement there was a cultural development also that you read in plenty during the Swadeshi movement. Agreed? तो ये हो गया cultural dimension. Psychological dimension, how it uplifted the mood of the masses, how it revived the faith in Gandhian leadership. So है Bardoli Satyagraha, but you should be, once you read it, or once your notes are ready, you should be able to draw these aspects. Rise of Nazism in Germany, especially after the Great Depression. इसके बहुत से डायमेंशन है. Political factors responsible for the rise of Nazism. What is the political dimension of Nazism? What is the cultural dimension of Nazism? What is the racial dimension of Nazism? Why they wanted to? What is the imperialist dimension of Nazism? समझ रहे इस बात को? So, a smart student or a person who understands history will read narrative, but will start, as Praveen sir ने कहा, you must be able to list keywords. Keywords यही है. For every topic, जैसे Vedic era, political transition from early to later, social transformation, evolution of Varna system, agricultural change, is there a climatic change, Harappans you read. So this is the second part. Why? Because for every question, once it is asked, especially those questions which require you to elaborate, you must be able to write multiple dimensions. And that is why history is a mother subject in many ways, which enables you to develop political ideas, social ideas, cultural aspects, changes in religious domain. यह सब समझते हैं आप. You study all this. For example, the portion that I take, modern world history, in that portion, there are definitely developments happening. American Revolution, French Revolution, events हो रहा है. Leaders will be there. Prominent resolutions will be passed. Declarations will be there. But then a good student will go through this and then try to draw deductions. What political change came? What social change came? Why? How? ये चीजें. Because once you start thinking in these directions, you will select only those relevant points from your narrative which help you to come up with the dimensions. आप सारी चीजें नहीं पढ़ोगे. When you read the battles of medieval India, बहुत से battles हैं. Battle of Khanwa, Battle of Tarain, Battle of Panipat, Battle of Talai Kota, बहुत से battles हैं. But तब आपका ध्यान उन battles पे होगा which resulted in rise and fall of kingdoms, rise and fall of states. आप उस पर ध्यान देंगे. You will not remember. तो फिर to substantiate it, to draw deductions, आप उन narratives पे focus करेंगे. Do you understand? And third part, history is a subject in which there is a lot of thesis. ये part. Thesis क्या होता है? Thesis is means conclusion which or inferences that you draw based on whatever has occurred or based on the evidences, which you call as arguments, which you call as historiography. Prominent historian E.H. Carr, those of you who have not read, E.H. Carr ने किताब लिखी. He was also working in the British Foreign Office, E.H. Carr. इन्होंने किताब लिखी What is History? Very famous book. In this book, What is History? E.H. Carr says that history is nothing but an interaction between historian and a fact. Means anything that has happened can be analyzed by two different persons in different ways and they will come up with their own conclusion. For example, till today, we consider partition as a unfortunate incident in the history of mankind. Many of you, if you are asked a question in your interview that if you are allowed to go back in time, what is one thing that you would like to change? I'm sure many of you would say that, sir, I would like to undo partition, because if that would have happened, possibly many of the problems that we are facing, especially on the foreign policy front, would have not existed. Agreed? So, but if you look partition from the perspective of Pakistani people, they call it liberation, they call it redemption. है ना? According to the British or imperial historians, they say that it was something that was bound to happen given the irreconcilable Hindu-Muslim divide. So development is one, partition, but how there are different interpretations. That is what makes this subject interesting also. I always say that history is a subject which starts with narrative but ends with opinion. It starts with narrative. But the subject is not just narrative. The subject is not just about stories or about events. It starts with narratives and ends with opinion. And one thing I can assure you, that a person who has internalized history becomes very opinionated, well informed opinion, whether it is in domestic affairs or in international affairs also. You will be able to understand. Therefore, we find that, as I said, E.H. Carr ne kaha hai, therefore, for every development, there are prominent historical differences. And why there are historical differences, which is we call as historiography. Why there is historiography? जैसे अभी प्रवीण sir said Dhamm, which is a very popular and for possibly a favorite theme of UPSC. Dhamm was a policy, but historians also differ on the nature of Dhamm and possibly why Akbar propounded Dhamm. Somebody will say that it has an element of ethics. Somebody will say that it was heavily influenced by Buddhism, and they will come up with their own evidences. Somebody will say that no, it is a political strategy to consolidate an empire which had reached its territorial maximum. Because you must understand a very basic fact that historians are, after all, human beings. Although history writing should be objective, but reality is that every historian will have his or her own bias and will have his or her own background which influences the interpretation. है ना? जैसे मैंने आपको एग्जांपल दिया पार्टीशन का, अगर पार्टीशन पे आप एज आईएएस ऑफिसर और एज अ हिस्टोरियन यू राइट, obviously you will say that it is unfortunate. Why? Because your upbringing has been done, or you see it from the perspective and you believe that India should have been undivided. That is why historiography should not be remembered. You must understand that, okay, if there are different schools of historiography. There are different schools of historiography, and as and when required, we evoke these schools or prominent historians to substantiate different arguments. Was Hitler responsible for the outbreak of Second World War? According to A.J.P. Taylor, Hitler did not want a Second World War. He possibly was content having Poland or some of West Russia. He was not the one who started the war, it is Britain and France. Whereas American historians, British historians, people like Adam Tooze, they say that no, Hitler was there. So यहाँ पर event वही हुआ है. So what I'll teach is that background for the rise of Adolf Hitler, and then I will tell you everything that has happened right from 1933 to 1939, 1st September. एक बार पहले वो पढ़ लिया, फिर हम बोलेंगे अच्छा आप बताओ. So then you will also come up with your opinion based on whatever I tell you. Then we will see that okay, it is a historiography. बहुत से schools हैं. Some historians, like there is a school, Rankian school, positivism. They just pick up the artifacts and archaeology. There is a Marxist school, Marxist historians, who study developments or events from the perspective of class struggle, economic forces shaping historical events. There are multiple. Annales school, who look at not the event but the larger story. So there are multiple. So मैं वही कह रहा हूं, step by step. Yes, this is the background. If I have to explain history like a subject, then this is the base of a pizza on which everything is happening, and then we need to have multiple crusts or layers over it, and then the topping comes, which is historiography. Everything is important. Without the base, you cannot study the subject. But a good student is one who understands to differentiate between 1, 2 and 3. पहले ये बात समझ लीजिए. Agreed? You are not supposed to just learn historiography. You must understand the linkage. And even without, it is not just historiography. कई बार हो सकता है historiography की जरूरत ना पड़े. कई बार the question may be just plain interpretation where you have to explain something. Tariq-e-Firoz Shahi as a reliable source for the study of Delhi Sultanate, यहाँ पे historiography की जरूरत नहीं है. Here you don't have to. So everything is not argumentative. Some things, or there are topics, so many things which must be presented as they have happened. But as you read, you must, wherever there is something scope of debate, then you must know how to differentiate it and why this debate has emerged. हर बात पे नहीं debate होता है. But this and why debate? Because I told you, any development can be interpreted. There is a lot of subjectivity into it. In our personal life also, in our day-to-day life. And guys, after completing these three pillars, comes the fourth one, which is something that is required for you, which the commission expects from you, which is very, very important. That is called as deductions, which I called as the invisible pillar, but the very, very important pillar of history optional preparation. What is deduction? Deduction मतलब आप क्या सीखते हैं? What is your understanding from this overall drama that has happened? When you are taught, when Praveen sir will teach Varna system, right from early Vedic to the evolution of various or emergence of various jati, then Rohan sir will teach proliferation of caste, peasantization of tribe. सब आपने पढ़ लिया. एक टॉपिक है which flows from ancient India to early medieval. फिर at the end you should be in a position to say two things on your own. तो फिर आप कहोगे that sir, yes, I can say that one system was largely a theoretical framework which started with fourfold classification. शुरुआत में तो चार ही थे. But over the period of time, with urbanization, with development of trade and commerce, with the expansion of economy, with rise of more occupation, even within the four one emerged various subclasses. And whatever was initially mentioned was not exactly followed. We have found numerous evidences of violation of the Varna Dharma. So it was a theoretical framework, but there are numerous examples where we have violations of the Varna Dharma. ये आपका example. This is your conclusion. Varna Dharma में लिखा है that only a Kshatriya should become a ruler. But you have numerous evidences in your ancient India where people from non-Kshatriya background have become this. So this is your deduction. Very, very important. है ना? This is very, very important. क्योंकि देखिए कोई भी सब्जेक्ट जब आप पढ़ते हैं, sociology, political science, anthropology, economics, mathematics, geography, PubAd, history, you are not just to acquire knowledge, you have to develop an understanding. Very, very important. मानते हैं इस बात को? Because if you don't have an understanding, then possibly you will not be able to internalize it and use this historical wisdom in your later life. मैं ऐसा नहीं कह रहा that whatever has happened in the past will happen again in future. No. But historical wisdom तो होना चाहिए. Many a times it is asked, for example, that why do we need to study the laws of trigonometry? We need to understand that we do not use the laws of trigonometry to solve equations, but it has developed a sense of logic in us. Possibly in our day-to-day life, we use it even while understanding or while doing it consciously. Geometry के कई laws हमने पढ़े थे बचपन में. Even if we don't do geometrical calculation, but we use it. We have a sense of geometry. आप समझ रहे हैं? So historical wisdom, or what I call as historical deduction, is very, very important, which is something that you should also develop for every section. इसीलिए देखिए अब ऐसे क्वेश्चंस भी आ रहे हैं where they are not just asking for all this, they are asking that how this is relevant in the contemporary times, how the teachings of Buddha is relevant in the contemporary times, how Gandhian values are relevant in the contemporary times, how French Revolution ideas are relevant in the contemporary world politics. क्यों पूछ रहे हैं ये? Because they know that only a person who has not only covered this but has this fourth dimension, fourth pillar, will be able to write these type of answers. आप समझ रहे हैं इस बात? ये क्वेश्चन क्यों पूछ रहे हैं? Why they are asking these type of questions? And they are asking these type of questions interestingly in GS also. They don't want you just acquire knowledge and mug up. They want you to have to internalize the information. आप बात समझ गए? It is very, very important. This is, in my words, the essence of the subject. Subject का अगर आप subject का nature देखें तो ये है. And you know what is the soul of history optional? This is the body. The soul of history optional is evidence. हर सब्जेक्ट का एक सोल होता है, आत्मा. Without that, that subject is not alive. So history optional subject is a subject where you have all this opinion, ये सब, but बिना evidence के वो thesis नहीं, hypothesis हो जाएगा. Agreed? So you must always, I'm not saying that you must remember everything, but जब भी आप किसी बात पर करें, whenever you talk about that Ashok, Akbar, Hitler, Napoleon, so you must have certain things to back what you are saying. इसको कहते हैं evidence. Nature of evidence are also plenty. In paper 1, you start with archaeological, literary, foreign accounts, agreed? Inscriptions, बहुत से हैं. Paper 2, sorry, in paper 1 medieval you have literary and archaeological also plethora. Paper 2, why? Because it has actually happened, and then it was, while it was happening, it was being documented. So we focus on historians, we focus on the actual accounts, so literary sources are there. But you must always remember that whenever possible and wherever required, you must substantiate what you are saying with the help of evidences. इस बात को याद रखिएगा. That is the soul of the subject. Without evidences, it does not look. और ये बहुत जरूरी है. It is very, very important that your understanding, your preparation, and your answer should reflect your depth, your width, and your multi-dimensional approach. Agreed? This is very, very important, my dear. As far as sources for the portion that I teach, I will teach modern world history, which is a part of your paper 2, along with modern India. Modern world history, we will study from the perspective of European powers. So I will start with Eurocentrism. We will understand that why do we study the history of modern world from the perspective of Europe. Why we have a Eurocentric approach of studying world history, and why certain European powers will be acquiring the center stage of our analysis. Studying modern world history will be in some ways different from Indian history, because in Indian history we have a same civilization, we have a same geography, and then we have an element of continuity. Agreed? एक के बाद चीजें sequentially हो रही हैं. But in world history, we are not talking about only one country or civilization. We keep moving, because we are focusing on the larger picture, the political evolution, economic change, from feudalism to capitalism, from absolutism to, say, representative government, from dark ages to the era of rationality and religion. Therefore, we do not focus on one state or one community. We move from state to state. So it is very, very important to connect the dots. So when we study modern world history, we study the history of human civilization over the last 500-600 years. How political changes have happened, how economic changes have happened, how our religious outlook has changed. ये पढ़ते हैं. किसी भी सब्जेक्ट को पढ़ने से पहले, before you start reading a subject, you must first ask this question yourself, or get it clear in your head that what this subject is about. What does it tell us? Modern world history tells us, because ये पूरी दुनिया का इतिहास है. So it is a history of political, economic, social, intellectual, religious, और cultural तो हो ही जाएगा. Then when we study modern world history, we start with the birth of modernity. अगर आप देखें, again, as I said, there will be obviously a lot of events, but concept is very, very important. Birth of modernity. Birth of modernity means how transition began in Europe. Europe की हालत अच्छी नहीं थी हमेशा. The situation in Europe was far worse than India, Egypt, China. इसीलिए उसको हम dark age कहते हैं. A time where European politics, European society, European economy, mindset of the people was completely gone. वहां से यूरोप का राइज होता है. We see changes. Why? How? So पहले हम पढ़ते हैं birth of modernity. We study first intellectual change in Europe. विचारों की क्रांति पहले पढ़ते हैं. Intellectual revolution before actual revolutions have come. 15th to 18th century in Europe is called as birth of modernity. How Europe gradually they started coming out of this dark age mindset. And what do we study? We start with Renaissance, Reformation, Scientific Revolution, and then Enlightenment. तो आप पढ़ते हो which were the new ideas, principles. आज हम बात करते हैं अपनी लाइफ में लिबर्टी की बात करते हैं, लिबरलिज्म. So history is a very philosophical subject also. Again, I am not saying this is why you should choose, but one very good aspect about reading history is that it develops your philosophical acumen, even if you are not from history. And this philosophical acumen, philosophical understanding, ideological understanding will be very, very helpful in your ethics paper, which you know it. Again, I am saying this should not be the starting point, but you should understand what are the key takeaways from this subject. Essays, it will enable you to think, because as I told you, second pillar, dimensions, एक philosophical dimension भी जोड़ दीजिए वहां पे. So we see change in philosophy. हम पढ़ेंगे रेने डेकार्ट, उसने कहा था इंसान, man is a cognitive being, I think therefore I am. तो ये सब्जेक्ट देखिए ऐसा है, we are not going to do a plain treatment. I would not say that this subject is just like GS. अगर वैसा होता तो फिर why to need a differential treatment? This subject has to be understood and felt. तो बहुत सोचना पड़ता है पढ़ने से ज्यादा. Alongside reading, you need to think also in the class. Because guys, this year's paper GS, last year's mains paper GS, optional, what message are we getting from the commission? That they want people who are well read, thoughtful, to get selected, not just who are well trained or who have just done hard work. तो आपको भी सोचना पड़ेगा. It is not just by reading too many books, it is by internalizing the subject, understanding the philosophical, political, सारी बातें आप जब समझोगे तो फिर आप खुद लिंकेज करने लगोगे. People ask, how do we write good answers? You write good answers by first studying in the right way, thinking, and then gradually you will start developing interlinkages. So पहले तो हम ये पढ़ते हैं birth of modernity. उसके बाद then we see the rise of political modernity. मतलब this, which are the important events which symbolize the transfer of power from the old guard to the new guard. पहले power किसके पास होता था? King, nobles. Now we see people will take control in their hand. तो हम पढ़ेंगे अमेरिकन रेवोल्यूशन, फ्रेंच रेवोल्यूशन, रशियन रेवोल्यूशन, चाइनीज रेवोल्यूशन. अग्रीड? मास लीडर्स इमर्जिंग. यही तो हो रहा है इंडिया के बैक नेबरहुड में, नेपाल, बांग्लादेश. So history is a subject which you start with few case studies, you start drawing inferences, and then you start connecting the dots. आप पढ़ने लगोगे. So I am telling you very upright that it is going to be content rich, content heavy, thought provoking, but interesting also if you flow with the right way. There is no shortcut to preparation. Let us be very clear about it. शॉर्टकट नहीं है. मैं आपको कभी ऐसा नहीं बोलूंगा दैट रीड दीज 4 notes and you will top. Yes, you have to read, you have to work, and then you will definitely get very close. In fact, you will differentiate yourself from the rest of the crowd. ये तो करना ही है. This examination is an examination of knowledge, but differentiated knowledge, not everything that you come across. तो आप पढ़ते हो political modernity, then you read economic modernity. How guys? Transition from feudalism to modern capitalism, जिसमें आपका एक चैप्टर है इंडस्ट्रियल रेवोल्यूशन. फिर हम पढ़ेंगे फिनेंस कैपिटलिज्म. देन वी सी सोशल मॉडर्निटी विच इज कंटेस्टेड. डिड द सोसाइटी बिकम प्रोग्रेसिव ड्यू टू आफ्टर अमेरिकन रेवोल्यूशन, फ्रेंच रेवोल्यूशन, रशियन रेवोल्यूशन? कंटेस्टेड है. फेमिनिस्ट डोंट अग्री बिकॉज विमेन वर डिनाइड. मार्क्सिस्ट डोंट अग्री. मार्क्स ने कहा रेवोल्यूशन तो अब आएगा व्हेन वर्कर्स विल हैव कंट्रोल ऑफ द मीन्स ऑफ प्रोडक्शन इन देयर ओन हैंड. मार्क्स ने कहा अमेरिकन रेवोल्यूशन, फ्रेंच रेवोल्यूशन हैज रिजल्टेड इन लिबर्टी ऑफ द रिच मिडिल क्लास, नॉट द वर्किंग क्लास. विमेन विल स्टार्ट देयर फेमिनिस्ट मूवमेंट. तो एक तो ये रिलीजन में बदलाव, रिफॉर्मेशन, प्यूरिटैनिज्म. अग्रीड. फिर आप पढ़ते पढ़ते कनेक्ट करोगे, अच्छा वी सी एलिमेंट ऑफ रिफॉर्मेशन in medieval India also. Bhakti Sufi movement, where also they said that instead of rituals we should focus also on direct connection with God. आप यूरोपियन फ्यूडलिज्म पढ़ोगे, रोहन सर is going to take your medieval section, no doubt about that. So I'll teach European feudalism, he will teach Indian feudalism. फिर हम जब दोनों पढ़ लेंगे we will try to compare. फिर हम देखेंगे how feudalism in India was also less oppressive because geographical conditions are more favorable. तो इस सब्जेक्ट में you do a lot of interlinkages also. Modern India, modern world. How after the loss of American colonies, British focused on India. Pitt India Act 1784, Amending Act 1786. How the physiocrats school of thinking influenced Lord Cornwallis permanent settlement in India. Agreed? तो आप इंडिया एंड द वर्ल्ड के बीच में बहुत पढ़ोगे. There is a section in your modern India, foreign policy of Indian National Congress. While Indian National Congress was contesting against the British Raj, they also had an orientation, global outlook. Pandit Nehru on many of the occasions represented the Congress and India on international conferences. Brussels Conference 1927. M.N. Roy attended the second Comintern where he, Abani Mukherjee, Hashrat Mohani, they formed Communist Party of India. So there is an international angle of Indian national movement. अब यूपीएससी ऐसे सवाल पूछ रहा है, हाउ इंडियन नेशनल मूवमेंट इन्फ्लुएंस द लिबरेशन स्ट्रगल इन अफ्रीका. डू यू गेट इट? तो एक तो हम ऐसे पढ़ेंगे, राइज ऑफ यूरोप, फॉल ऑफ यूरोप आफ्टर सेकेंड वर्ल्ड वॉर. इन वर्ल्ड हिस्ट्री वी ऑल्सो स्टडी पावर स्ट्रगल बिटवीन फर्स्ट एम्पायर्स, kingdoms and later nation states. World War I was a conflict between empires. World War II was a conflict between ideologies. So today in this workshop or orientation, I want you to just have a orientation of the subject. कि हम सिर्फ narrative नहीं करते. We will not do just narrative. We will want you to first go gradually from step 1 to step 2, step 2, step 3. And I expect all of you to have developed this fourth pillar. आप ये कर लेंगे तो आपको सब्जेक्ट में भी मजा आएगा and you will end up scoring high also. We will focus on the process. Agreed? It is not a shortcut, but it is the requirement. The good part is, again I'm saying this should not be the basis on which you take optional. The good part is that once you prepare history optional, you don't have to prepare GS. And given the fact that the nature of prelims questions are getting tougher, possibly it can give you an advantage. Many of the questions which are, it looks like, which are very difficult to attempt for a general candidate, will be comparatively more easier for you. But in सब बातों पे subject मत लीजिए, subject लीजिए interest पे. When you take the subject, you must also come up with a mindset that I will spend the next 6 months in a disciplined manner, and I will develop and focus on the subject in a structured manner. So this is all that I have to say today. Please call Praveen sir. And we will now be taking your doubts. Whatever doubts you have regarding the course, regarding the subject, anything, please start asking. Praveen sir will join and he will answer along with me. Aye sir, please. Sorry.
Any questions? नहीं, करंट अफेयर से लिंकेज देखने का मतलब यह है कि देयर आर इश्यूज इन न्यूज, हाईलाइट दोज इश्यूज. ऐसा नहीं है ऑप्शनल में दे विल आस्क यू करंट अफेयर्स, बट देयर आर इश्यूज इन न्यूज. जैसे आई हैव टोल्ड यू कि सम डिबेट, सम न्यूज, सम चेंजिंग व्यूज, सम स्कॉलर, जैसे ऑर्डरी ट्रस्ट के ने भी बोला ना पशुपति सील नहीं है, तो इट मींस हड़प्पन रिलीजन इज परहैप्स इंपॉर्टेंट फॉर द एग्जाम. जीएस आल्सो ऑप्शनल आल्सो. तो करंट अफेयर्स का ये मतलब नहीं, इट्स नॉट दैट कि सम साइट इज एक्सकवेटेड यू हैव टू इंक्लूड दैट साइट. इफ दैट साइट इज ऑफ, जैसे एनीवन हर्ड कीलड़ी साइट, तो कीलड़ी साइट इज इन इंडस वैली सिविलाइजेशन, ठीक है ना. तो कैसे, हाउ यू नो दैट कीलड़ी साइट इज पार्ट ऑफ इंडस वैली सिविलाइजेशन और कुड बी पार्ट ऑफ इंडस वैली सिविलाइजेशन? इफ दिस इज इंडस वैली सिविलाइजेशन, this is site number 1, this is site number 2. Please guess which is in Indus Valley civilization. Now, if site number 1 has no citadel, fortification wall, beads, seals, अगर इसमें नहीं है, it is not part of Indus Valley civilization. और यहाँ है, so this is part of Indus. We will change the map. So now you have to understand what makes a site Indus Valley civilization site. So what are the features of Indus Valley civilization? So आपके लिए features of Indus Valley civilization are more important. Once they have asked what are the uniformity and diversity of civilization, Indus Valley civilization में क्या क्या चीजें same थी, and which site have difficult. Anyone heard grid pattern? Grid, what is grid pattern? 90 degree. But जो बनावली की साइट है उसमें ऐसे citadel है, radial pattern. तो ये uniformity है, diversity है. It comes from the recent debates. इसका ये बिल्कुल मतलब नहीं है कि what is site came in news you are started reading it, आप उसको पढ़ना शुरू कर दे, वो साइट आई, वो साइट आई. You need some scholars view on it. जो भी recent debate है, whatever the recent debate, जैसे अभी 100th year of, मान लो 100th year of INA, 100th year of RSS, तो ये क्वेश्चन पूछ सकते हैं कि what is the importance role of INA in India's independence. करंट अफेयर्स का ये बिल्कुल मतलब नहीं है कि some site something come in news वो डायरेक्ट कोई पूछ देगा. हाँ जी, any other? When will classes start? Sir, class कब से start? 20th June. Is morning batch also scheduled? Evening 5:30. How many question attempt in exam, like how many question attempt in ancient or medieval? Medical के medieval. तो बताया सर आपने? How many questions to attempt? How many questions क्या उसमें ज़्यादा ऑप्शन ही नहीं होगा आपके पास. They will simply ask you question number 1. All 5 are asked A, B, C, D, E. फिर question number 2, 3 में any 2 of this, any 2 of this या 2, 3 ऐसे. You will get some options to do it. वो तो आप उसकी चिंता मत करें, है ना. हाँ जी.
सर आपने जो पॉइंट बताया 3+ डिडक्शन वाला, थोड़ा और एक्सप्लेन करते हैं पहले ये कोर्स के बारे में.
I have qualified for state mains. Please help me with strategy for mains. I heard prelims and mains are different pattern. Optional में तो prelims होता ही नहीं है. Optional have no prelims. Optional only have mains, which is answer writing. नहीं, रोहन सर takes GS lecture and optional both. ठीक है. हाँ, will रोहन सर teach optional? ये बात ही कैसे आ गई? सर तबीयत ठीक है? हाँ भाई ठीक है. हाँ सर आप बताएं.
What are the recommended books for reference? बताइए सर.
Reference recommended books. वैसे तो notes are enough, I think यार. Notes will be more than enough. फिर भी fear of missing out में in ancient I would suggest उपिंदर सिंह पढ़ लें. In medieval I would suggest सतीश चंद्रा and some topics from IGNOU notes. Modern में सर कौन सी बताते हैं? BL ग्रोवर, शेखर बंदोपाध्याय, any of them. सर वर्ड में कौन सी? अब नॉर्मन लो. है ना. बट आई थिंक कि इतनी बल्कि बुक्स, व्हाई टू रीड देम, फॉर व्हाट टीचर्स आर. ये आपको सुनने में थोड़ा आइडियलिस्टिक लगेगा, यू विल फील कि इट इज अ बिट आइडियलिस्टिक, बट इट इज नॉट. I always tell a student, I always tell, do post study. When I teach something, go and study it. It will save your labor. Because syllabus is infinite, यार. हम बैठ के ऐसा थोड़ी कि you have to become historian. Infinite syllabus. Teachers ही ऐसा नहीं है सारा syllabus cover कर पाए, कोई नहीं कर सकता. People die. अब इरफान हबीब की एज 90s में है, तो ऐसा थोड़ी he know everything about medieval India. So you have to cover so that you should be able to answer, and you will be. How to prepare mapping, I will teach you exactly how to prepare mapping. 11 or 12 classes I'll take for mapping. It's guarantee. I think in first part of the discussion I've told you how to. How many teachers will teach? 4. ठीक है. Ancient history.
World history is compromised.
World history was compromised.
Compromised?
World history was, वो तो उनकी इच्छा है, वो तो सब आपका व्यू है. हाँ जी सर, वो आप बताएं जो बता रहे हैं.
बताने कुछ है नहीं.
ठीक है. आई थिंक इट इज डन. ठीक है, तो विल मीट ऑन 20 जून. ठीक है. ठीक है सर. हाँ जी.
You said about Agaz Mukerjee's economy, sir, opposing.
हाँ.
So we will be learning those opposing.
Obviously, that's the purpose.
What are the future questions? Past, they asked about this Agaz. What are the future?
Future में if debate is organic, if teacher is answering naturally and you are interested in the topic, there is no chance teacher will not cover it. ऐसा हो ही नहीं सकता है कि टीचर न कवर करे उसे. जैसे फॉर एग्जाम्पल in 1916 there was a Lucknow Pact. Congress accepted separate credit. Separate credit means Muslim will vote separately, Hindus will vote separately. इसका पॉजिटिव भी है, नेगेटिव भी. Some say it was master stroke by Congress, some say it is mistake by Congress. आप ही किसी से डिस्कस करें एज अ स्कॉलर एंड आस्क अबाउट द पॉलिसी ऑफ मोदी गवर्नमेंट, यू विल डिस्कस बोथ साइड्स. तो ठीक बात है, टीचर विल आल्सो डिस्कस. ये हर व्यू में है सर. इट इज नॉट ओनली हियर, इन एवरी व्यू, है ना. आप इसकी चिंता ना करें कि ऐसा क्वेश्चन आ गया. दैट इज द पर्पस ऑफ टीचर. इसी के लिए वो सारा डिबेट, डिस्कशन, हिस्टोरियोग्राफी है. हाउ मेनी ऑप्शनल पेपर शुड वी चूज? कैपेसिटी है वैसे तो, अदरवाइज यूपीएससी वांट्स यू टू चूज वन. यूपीएससी में एक ही ऑप्शनल आता है, बाकी आपकी कैपेसिटी है, हाउ मच यू कैन स्टडी. आई डोंट थिंक यू शुड गो फॉर. ये जब एक सब्जेक्ट है, वन सब्जेक्ट, इट्स लाइक फ्रॉम हाउ मेनी नोज वी शुड ब्रीथ, वन. एक नाक से सांस लें जब गॉड ने एक नाक बनाई है, बाकी मर्जी है आपकी. लाइकवाइज इफ वन ऑप्शनल पेपर यूपीएससी से ऑप्शनल पेपर, ऐसा कभी सुना ऑप्शनल पेपर 1, ऑप्शनल पेपर 2? देयर वाज अ टाइम दे यूज्ड टू आस्क 2 ऑप्शनल पेपर्स, एंड रविंद्रन सर टोल्ड मी इन 70s देयर वर 5 ऑप्शनल पेपर्स. तो अब ये सब, आई डोंट थिंक आपकी एज से आप 70s के होंगे तो आपको कंफ्यूजन है. तो ठीक है, 1 ऑप्शनल पेपर. आई थिंक
Yes.
वी आर डन.
Thank you.
थैंक्स.
Thank you.
थैंक्स.